Have you ever felt scared to speak English? Like, your heart beats fast, your mouth goes dry and nothing comes out? People laugh, they joke, and you feel small, broken. I know that pain. But today, I'm going to tell you a story. A story that can change the way you see English and yourself. Before we start, if you truly want to speak English with confidence, then like this video, subscribe to this channel, and please share this story with someone who needs it. Because sometimes, one story can give someone the courage to keep going. Ready? Let's begin. He was the boy everyone laughed at. Not because he didn't try, not because he didn't care, but because every time he opened his mouth to speak English, fear took over. His classmates laughed when he mispronounced a word, teachers corrected him in front of everyone, and even relatives whispered things like, "He'll never make it without English." Inside, he was breaking, but on the outside he kept smiling, pretending it didn't hurt. At night, when the world slept, he sat with his cheap phone, watching English videos on low volume, copying lines, rewinding again and again until the words sounded right. He didn't have coaching classes, fancy apps, or native speakers to talk to. He had just one thing: the belief that one day he would speak and the world would listen. People around him told him to stop dreaming big. "You don't even speak English properly. How will you work abroad?" they said with a smirk. But he didn't answer them. He answered himself. Every mistake became practice. Every laugh became fuel. He didn't focus on sounding perfect. He focused on being brave. Slowly, his broken sentences turned into conversations. His fear turned into confidence. And one day, he sat for a job interview with a company from another country. He spoke slowly, clearly, honestly. And they didn't laugh. They smiled. They said, "You're hired." That was the day everything changed. The boy they once laughed at was now working with professionals from around the world, speaking English every day. Not perfectly, but fearlessly. And the same people who once laughed at him, they now ask him for advice. Because when the world tried to silence him, he chose not to be silent. He chose to rise. He wasn't born with confidence, and he didn't grow up hearing English at home. In fact, no one in his family spoke it. His father worked long hours driving an auto rickshaw, coming home tired, hands rough from the wheel. His mother was gentle, loving, but spoke only their local language, and Ravi never blamed her for not being able to help. He would see his friends speak English with ease and wonder what it felt like to not be afraid of your own voice. He had no one to correct his grammar, no one to practice with, and yet he had a hunger most didn't. Not a hunger for fame or money, but for respect, for freedom, for the ability to sit in any room and not feel small. He knew that the world respected those who spoke English, and even though he hated that truth, he couldn't ignore it. So he made a promise to himself, quietly, with no audience, no camera, no likes or views. Just him, sitting on a broken plastic chair in a small room with peeling paint, whispering one sentence a day, just one sentence. And so it began. Not with fluency, not with confidence, but with one broken sentence after another, repeated 100 times until it stopped sounding foreign. He spoke to mirrors, to walls, to empty notebooks filled with words he didn't fully understand. There were days he made no progress, days he felt like giving up, but he didn't, because he knew no one was coming to save him. And if he wanted to rise, he had to do it alone. Some days, the weight of it all was too much. He would sit in the corner of his room, head down, books open but mind closed, wondering if anything he was doing would ever matter. The English words felt like a wall he couldn't climb, tall, cold, and full of cracks. No one clapped for his effort. No one saw the hours he put in. There were no results, no rewards, just failure and frustration. But deep inside him there was a quiet voice that never stopped whispering. Keep going. That voice was small, but louder than all the laughter he had heard growing up. And slowly things began to change, not in big, dramatic ways, but in little wins that only he noticed. One day, he understood a full sentence in a video without subtitles. Another day, he spoke a full thought in English without pausing. He didn't tell anyone, but inside, he smiled. He started writing his thoughts in English, not for an exam, not for school, but for himself. It didn't matter if the grammar was wrong. It mattered that he was no longer scared of trying. He began to see English not as a monster, but as a muscle. The more he trained it, the stronger it got. He realized fluency wasn't about sounding like someone else. It was about expressing yourself, no matter how simple your words were. And so, in silence, away from the noise of the world, he kept building a voice he was once too afraid to use. One evening, as the sun was setting and the town around him grew quiet, he sat alone on the rooftop, staring at the open sky, wondering what his future would look like. He had come far, but it still felt like the world didn't see him. And then, out of habit, he opened a free job portal on his phone, something he did often, just to look. But this time, something caught his eye. Remote internship, English communication required, international team, no experience needed. His heart beat faster. He knew he wasn't ready. His English wasn't perfect. He had never spoken to a foreigner in his life. But something inside him said, "Apply anyway." He opened the form, hands shaking. He wrote the cover letter himself, using the simple English he had practiced for years. He didn't try to sound like anyone else. He just told his story honestly. How he was afraid of English, how he practiced alone, and how he still makes mistakes, but never stops trying. He clicked send. For the next 3 days, he checked his email every hour. On the 4th day, just as he was about to sleep, his phone buzzed. "We'd love to speak with you. Let's schedule an interview." He didn't scream, didn't dance. He just sat quietly, letting the moment wash over him. No one knew what that message meant to him. But he knew. It was not just an interview. It was the first door that ever opened. The day of the interview came faster than he expected. He didn't have a suit or a fancy background. He cleaned the corner of his small room, placed a plain bedsheet behind his chair, and opened his old laptop that still had a cracked screen. He looked at himself in the camera, nervous eyes, sweaty palms, a voice he wasn't sure would come out. The time struck 4 p.m. The screen blinked. A face appeared, kind, professional, speaking fluent English. "Hi, Ravi, can you hear me?" the man asked. Ravi froze for a second, but then he remembered everything. The mirror practice, the late-night videos, the words he had repeated 1,000 times. He took a breath and said, slowly, clearly, "Yes, sir. I can hear you." And just like that, the interview began. His sentences were not perfect. He paused often. Sometimes he forgot a word. But he didn't stop. He smiled through the nervousness. He answered with heart. And instead of pretending to be perfect, he was honest. "I'm still learning," he said at one point. "But I work hard, and I never give up." There was a short silence. The interviewer smiled. Ravi, thank you. That's all I needed to hear. The next morning, Ravi received the email that changed everything. Congratulations, you've been selected. For a full minute, he couldn't move. He read the email again and again like it wasn't real. The boy, who once couldn't say a full sentence in class, had just been hired by an international company, all because he chose not to be silent. His first day at work didn't start with a handshake. It started with a video call filled with unfamiliar faces, new accents, and nervous energy. As his name was called in the virtual meeting, he felt the old fear return for a moment, the fear that had followed him for years. But this time, he didn't hide from it. He turned on his mic, smiled, and said, "Hello, everyone. I'm Ravi. I'm excited to work with you." And just like that, he was no longer the boy from a small town who struggled with English. He was now part of a global team, sending emails, joining meetings, and sharing ideas with people from countries he had only seen on maps. At first, he didn't understand every word his teammates said. Some spoke too fast. Some used phrases he had never heard before. But instead of feeling ashamed, he asked questions. He wrote down new words. He took notes after every call. His teammates appreciated his effort, not his perfection. Slowly, he began to speak more. He started giving short updates in meetings, then longer presentations. Every week his confidence grew. His mistakes didn't stop, but neither did his progress. He realized that people didn't care if his grammar was perfect. They cared that he showed up, spoke up, and brought value. And for the first time in his life, Ravi didn't feel small when he spoke English. He felt powerful, not because he had mastered the language, but because he had mastered his fear. Months passed. Ravi was now earning in a foreign currency, working from his small room, attending meetings with people across time zones, and writing reports in English every day. His life had changed, not with loud noise or big celebrations, but with quiet progress that only he truly understood. Then one day he returned to his hometown for a family event. As he walked through the narrow streets where he once kept his head low, people looked at him differently. Neighbors asked, "Is it true? You're working with foreigners now?" A cousin who once mocked his English came up and said, "How did you improve so much?" Ravi smiled, not with pride, but with peace. He hadn't forgotten the laughter, the teasing, or the silence he lived with for years. But now, those voices no longer controlled him. He visited his old school and saw the same classroom where he once stood, frozen in fear. A new teacher recognized him and invited him to speak to the students. Standing in front of them, he said, "I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the best in English. But I was willing to keep going when everyone told me to stop." And as he looked around the room, at faces filled with the same fear he once had, he knew that his story was no longer just about him. It was hope, quietly passed from one heart to another. Ravi sat on his rooftop that night, under the same sky where he once dreamed of a life bigger than his fear. The wind was quiet, the stars scattered, and his heart finally calm. He thought about the boy he used to be, the boy who was too scared to speak, too afraid to be seen, too broken to believe. He thought about all the nights he whispered English words to the mirror, not knowing if they would ever reach anyone. And now, here he was, still imperfect, still learning, but no longer afraid. He didn't become fluent in a day. He didn't suddenly become confident. He grew, slowly, painfully, honestly. Not because someone gave him a shortcut, but because he chose not to give up when no one believed in him. He remembered every laugh, every insult, every moment of silence that felt like a punch to the heart. But now, those memories didn't hurt. They taught. He realized something powerful. English is not just a language. It's a bridge, a key, a voice. And every person who has been laughed at, every person who has been told, "You can't," needs to hear what he now knew. You don't need perfect grammar to change your life. You just need courage. And that courage doesn't come from outside. It comes from inside. From every time you speak, fail, and speak again. As he looked up at the stars, Ravi smiled and said softly, "They laughed because they didn't see what I could become. But I did. And somewhere in the world, someone just like him was watching this story, maybe holding back tears, maybe holding back words, and finally feeling ready to begin. And if you're someone who's still afraid to speak, if you've been hiding your voice because you think your English isn't good enough, let me tell you this. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to begin. And if you're ready to practice in a way that actually works, step by step, in a way that builds real confidence, then I've added one of the best English practice videos for you in the description below. Watch it till the end. Practice with it. It could be the start of your own transformation. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, because someone else out there is feeling the same fear you once felt. Your one like might help them find this story, and that could change everything.